I had been married for 18 years and still didn't know my wife. It was probably my fault for not trying harder. We seemed to get along fine, but there was no real connection between us. I never considered her the love of my life, and I had a feeling it was mutual. But we were compatible enough to have 3 teenage children. I worked in the claims department of a large auto insurance company. It was an office job with good benefits. I would have retirement benefits in 3 years. We owned our own home, but the mortgage amount was more than the current appraised value. Noreen was a good spouse in every way. Because of her 3 children, she was a homemaker. The house was always clean, clothes washed and ironed, and meals cooked perfectly. All the housework must have been good exercise for her because she still had the same fine figure she had in high school when we met. College didn't interest either of us. We got married a year after I entered the workforce. Noreen wanted to get away from her parents and be alone. I wanted regular sex. Since we were comfortable with each other, we seemed like a good couple. Unfortunately, there was no crazy, passionate, fairy tale romance between us. The sex was always good. So far, I never felt that there were any problems between us, especially in that area. I guess I was wrong. It started at one of those horrible company parties. I didn't dance, but Noreen did. I had no problem giving her complete freedom of action just to keep her out of my way. I spent the evening sitting with several other spouses who didn't dance. Unmarried guys entertained wives and single girls on the dance floor most of the night. The only problem seemed to be that she danced with Dirk Franklin more than I thought was necessary. He was a good dancer, but he was also a wordy womanizer. Several times during the evening I lost sight of Noreen for a few moments, but she always reappeared. It wasn't the most fun evening for me, but it was a sacrifice I made so my wife could cheer up a bit. The most enjoyable part would be the sex when we got home. A little drinking had a big effect on her behavior in bed. It made the time spent at the party more bearable. That night was particularly enjoyable. On Monday morning at work, it all came off like a shot in the arm. Everything was fine for the first few hours, but then I started to notice some guys looking in my direction and some giggling. I looked closer and found Dirk chatting casually about his recent conquest. Twice he looked in my direction and smiled, or should I say smirked at me. Dirk and I aren't very close. I don't like the guy, and I didn't appreciate what he was doing. Shortly before lunch, I managed to corner one of my most trusted coworkers in the copy room. "Barry, what the hell is going on with Dirk? If that son of a bitch smiles at me one more time, I'm gonna punch him." "I'm not sure if it's true or not, John, but he's bragging to everyone about screwing Noreen on Saturday night." "That's bullshit. Noreen would never let him near her." "That's what I thought, but he's got panties he claims are hers. He shows them to all the guys and even lets them smell them. How could he get his hands on her panties? It doesn't make sense." "John, he claims she gave them to him after he screwed her in one of the hotel conference rooms. Did you see them?" "Yeah, they were silk, gray or silver in color." "Thanks, Barry. Don't say anything to anyone. I owe you one." If Barry had said the panties were red or black, I would have just joked. But I was there when Noreen got dressed for the party. She wore her favorite silver silk lingerie set. I'd bought her a bra and panties for Valentine's Day this year. About 20 minutes later, I noticed Dirk heading for the men's room. He'd had a lot of coffee this morning. I followed right behind him. I'm not a fan of playground conversations. There was no way I was going to confront Dirk face to face and ask him or order him to stop spreading lies about my wife. For one reason, I was no longer sure it was a lie. If I did meet him face to face, it would probably alert him. I didn't want that to happen. The easiest way to solve the problem would have been to bang his head against the tiled wall in front of the urinal. Since I was a gentleman, I waited until he was done and then punched him with my fist right in the nose as soon as he turned around. Something slammed loudly and my shirt got blood all over it. That pissed me off, so I punched him again as he bent over, clutching his nose. Dirk was a big guy, but he offered no resistance and made no attempt to defend himself or fight back. I found some silk panties in his pocket and kicked him twice hard in the crotch area. As I was leaving the bathroom, I noticed that he was vomiting. I left early for an early lunch, and when I returned, I learned that my employment with the company had been terminated. Dirk was taken to the hospital. It took them less than 20 minutes to finalize the checkout, and I was past it. Today was shopping day. I was sitting at the kitchen table when Noreen pulled into the garage. I looked up as she entered the kitchen with several bags of groceries. "Hi, honey, what are you doing home in the middle of the day? Are you sick?" I didn't answer as she set the plastic bags on the countertop. "Would you like to help me bring in the rest of the stuff?" I never answered, and she went back into the garage. She returned with 6 more bags, but without saying anything, she set them on the edge of the table. "Is something wrong, John? I can tell you that. Why are you home?" Saying this, she began to sort through the bags. "I've been fired." "That doesn't make sense. Why would they fire you?" I sat there trying to figure out how to start a conversation. I'm not so sure about that. In the end, I just threw her panties across the table. "Oh, God, no!" Upon seeing them, Noreen sat up and grabbed her head with both hands. No, 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 this can't be happening." I saw my wife begin to cry. It was neither a moan nor a wail, but something in between. "Can you explain that to me?" After my question, the crying seemed to intensify. She put her head down on the table, and all I could hear was her quiet mumbling over and over, "No, no, 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 no." I waited patiently for almost a minute. My wife tried to wipe the tears from her face and then looked at me. "I'm sorry, John. Really sorry. It was a mistake. I drank too much and made a mistake." "Bullshit! You weren't that drunk. You knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you?" "No, John. You have to believe me. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. There's nothing going on between me and Dirk. Honestly, I'm really, really sorry." "If it was a mistake, why didn't you tell me when it happened?" "I didn't want you to find out. I didn't want to hurt you." "If you didn't want me to find out, why would you do it with the biggest blabbermouth in the company?" "He promised he wouldn't say anything to anyone." "Damn, are you that stupid? This morning he let every guy in the building sniff them out. Why were you stupid enough to let him take them?" "I didn't let him take them. I gave them to him so he could throw them away. I used them, and I couldn't put them back on." "Why did you use $30 panties to clean yourself up?" "John, I'm sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen." "You mean I should never have found out about it, or that you shouldn't have done it?" "Both! Damn it, I screwed up, John. What do you want me to say? Do you really expect me to say I forgive you?" "I don't." "How about a reason? Can you give me a reason why you did it and not give me some bullshit about you being drunk?" "I don't buy that for a minute." "No, I wasn't that drunk. Dirk and I had a good time all night. He's a good dancer and a very funny man. He knows just the right thing to say to a girl. Something that makes you feel good. So you two just wandered into one of those empty conference rooms and made mad, passionate love?" "No, that's not what happened." "How did it happen?" "Don't make me do this, John. Don't make me talk about it. It took me longer to clean myself up." "That's what you have me for, isn't it?" "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean. What was the first thing you did when we got home? Tell me, Noreen. What did you tell me to do when we were in the bedroom?" "No, John. It had nothing to do with what Dirk and I did. Honestly. I'm sorry, but that's not how I see it." "John, you're making a big deal out of this. It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything. We can get through this." "Noreen, do you really think it was nothing? I lost my job. I lost my pension. I lost my wife and kids. I guess it meant nothing to you, but it meant everything to me." My wife just sat there and looked at me while I got up out of my chair. "I have to leave now. The police will probably be here soon. I don't want to talk to them right now." "Why are the police coming? What else is going on, John?" "I'm afraid I offended your lover a little when I returned your underpants. That's why I was fired. I'm sure the police have already gotten a statement from Dirk. Hell, I could spend a couple months in jail just so you could sleep with me for a minute. Thanks a lot, sweetheart." "Where are you going? What am I supposed to do now?" "I don't know where I'm going to be. I loaded all my stuff in the car while you went shopping. I'll call you later." She looked like she was about to turn the waterworks back on. I turned around before heading out the door. "I reserve the right for you to explain what happened to the kids. If you lie or distort the truth, I can guarantee you'll regret it. I had enough money in my bank accounts to last at least 6 months. Before I left town, I paid off all my credit cards and canceled them. She could spend the money as she wanted or was forced to, but I didn't want to run out of money. I was sure she would take care of the kids. They would be out of school for the summer in a couple weeks. I didn't know if that would make Noreen's life easier or harder. I had no idea what I would do when the money ran out. I wasn't even sure if I would be able to collect unemployment since I was laid off for good reason. The first night I stayed at my brother's house in Schuylkill Haven. He had a small apartment and was more than willing to shelter me under his desk until I found something permanent. The next day, I moved into a small, furnished one-bedroom apartment that included utilities. There was even cable to connect to the internet. Since I left the house, my phone had been off. I didn't feel like answering the phone, but I knew I would have to talk to the kids sooner or later. Working with Robbie was easy, but not particularly enjoyable. The other three guys were skilled at climbing trees, as well as picking cherries and chopping stumps. My job was to act as a helper for them. They seemed to appreciate my efforts and were more than willing to teach me all the little tricks and skills. I kept busy and tried my best to forget about the problem with Noreen. The only thing I knew for sure was that I would file for divorce as soon as possible. Terry was my oldest daughter. She was smart and sweet as candy. She was graduating from high school in 2 months and was enrolling in dental technician classes at the local college. Brian was to join the Marines as soon as he graduated next year. Sal had 2 more years of school left, and all she wanted to do was get married and have children. She had once wanted to be a teacher, but I think she had outgrown that. They were all good kids. Brian ran all over the neighborhood because he felt it would help him become tougher for a career in the service. Terry worked as a candy saleswoman at one of the local hospitals. I'm not sure, but I think Twitter was invented by Sal. If she didn't invent it, she certainly perfected it. The only contact I had with any of the kids was through Terry. I didn't feel comfortable discussing family problems with Sal because she was too young, and Brian didn't want to talk about it at all. After I left, Noreen sat the kids down with the whole group. She told them why I had left and apparently wasn't hiding anything. Brian immediately left the room and never spoke to his mother again. Sal just sat there and cried. Terry was the only one of the 3 who was willing to have any conversation about the breakup. Noreen refused to explain to Terry why it had happened. She just talked about it without going into detail. I filed for divorce and things went south. Terry called me and told me that their mother had started leaving the house in the evenings several times a week. She usually came home drunk. Terry said it started right after the divorce papers were filed. The children did their best to avoid Noreen, but her actions still had a bad effect on the family as a whole. As far as Terry knew, there was no male involvement. Brian wouldn't talk to his mother, and Sal whined all the time. Terry was the only one who interacted with Noreen at all, and that was usually pretty limited. I didn't like it, but as long as Noreen didn't bring any boys home, I didn't feel I had to pry. A week later, things got really bad. I was at work with Josh and Jimmy, 2 climbers. They were at the top cutting branches, and I was working on the ground feeding into the chipper. Things seemed to be going pretty well until I was approached by 2 guys who drove up in a Dodge. It was common for people to talk to us while we were working. They were usually interested in what we were doing and what the rates were. I always had a supply of Robbie's business cards in my shirt pocket for such occasions. As I was holding out a business card to one of the visitors, the second of them gave me a hard punch in the temple. It was unexpected and produced the results he was seeking. I was on all fours trying to regain consciousness when they started stomping on me with their boots. There was no time to think, plan, or take any defensive action. They successfully immobilized me before I realized what had happened. The best I could do was curl up and try to minimize the damage. I'm not sure how long it lasted, but it stopped as suddenly as it started. Josh tried to get me to sit up. I strained my vision as much as I could and noticed Jimmy talking on his cell phone and the Dodge driving away. I was hurting like hell. The worst part was that I couldn't breathe. Every time I tried to inhale, a sharp pain pierced my right side. It was my first broken rib. It was then that I noticed that the bigger of the 2 guys was lying on the ground next to me. His head had turned into a bloody mess. Jimmy and Josh noticed what was going on and tried to get down to help me as soon as they could. To speed things up a bit, Josh lowered his chainsaw by the safety rope and swung it at the guys who were kicking me. The dangling steel chainsaw hit the larger of the 2 guys in the head, and it looks like he lost his ear. His buddy, wasting no time, got the hell out of there. Even though the chainsaw wasn't really working, it left a huge gash on the baboon's head. After a few minutes, he started to move, and Jimmy gave him a good kick in the balls. Other than one hard kick to the head, all the other damage was done to my body. I just sat motionless until the ambulance crew arrived. I refused to ride in the same ambulance with the guy who attacked me, so the local police ended up transporting him in the back of the patrol car. When I got there, Robbie was in the hospital. The big guy had a deep gash on the side of his head. His ear wasn't blown off, but he was badly mangled. I didn't feel too bad, but the doctor and Robbie insisted I stay the night. The cops picked up the other big guy in the Dodge before he'd gone 10 kilometers. After eating a mediocre dinner, I settled in for the night, but not for long. It was almost 1 a.m. when my cell phone rang. Who the hell would be calling me at this hour? In fact, who would call me at all? Dad, it's Terry. We have a problem and we need your help. I don't think I can help you right now, but what the hell is so important that you're calling in the middle of the night? Mom's in jail, and someone has to bail her out. What's she in jail for? She crashed her car and she got busted for a DUI. Is she okay? She's not hurt? Not really, but the car's in pretty bad shape. She destroyed about 6 parked cars before crashing into a fire hydrant. Was she alone? Yeah. I don't know anything else. She won't be released until some kind of bond or bail is posted. I didn't know what else to do, so I called you. Terry, we got a little problem. I'm not home right now. I'm at Pottsville Memorial Hospital. I was injured at work today, and the doctor wanted to keep me overnight. I'm fine, but I can't leave. Maybe you should call your Aunt Sarah. She'd probably be more than happy to help your mom. What's wrong? Why are you in the hospital? I broke 2 ribs. They wrapped me up like a mummy, and I don't know if I can even drive. I'll be fine, so don't worry about me. I just need to rest for a few days. I didn't see the need to tell her how the accident happened. She had enough problems of her own right now. Is there anything I can do for you? See if you can find out a little more about what happened to your mother. I'm just a little curious. Okay, I'll call you tomorrow afternoon and see how things are going. Robbie drove me to my apartment and put some microwavable food in the freezer. I asked him to buy me a couple 6-packs of beer, but all I got was some Coke. I was able to move fast enough to go to the bathroom and feed myself. Unfortunately, I was forced to watch the Adam Sandler movie festival all day. Shortly before dark, Terry called. Noreen was having drinks with some people who worked at my former company. I thought it was interesting since I no longer worked there. I had no idea she had any friends who worked there other than Dirk. They were just starting to have fun when the police showed up and arrested Dirk. Noreen got very upset and started drinking more than usual. Before closing time, she refused to call a cab and let anyone drive her home. Terry was never able to find out why Dirk was arrested and why Noreen freaked out when it happened. We talked for a few more minutes. Terry was glad to hear that I was home and could take care of myself. They wanted to come over to my place, but they didn't have a car. Sarah had bailed my wife out, but Noreen hadn't come home. Terry gave me Sarah's cell phone number. Sarah, it's John. What the hell is going on? Your wife's a mess, John, and it's your goddamn fault. Whoa, wait a minute, Sarah. How is this my fault? You left her, that's why. You left her with 3 kids and just ran away. Who the hell do you think you are? Come on, Sarah, you know me better than that. Why would I just get up one morning, quit my job, and leave my wife and kids? Does that make any sense to you? Noreen said you were fired and that you were taking it out on her. Did she say why I was fired? She said you beat up a guy at work because she danced with him at a company party. Sarah? She wasn't dancing with him. She slept with him. Right at the party. She told you that? There was a short pause. No, she didn't tell me anything like that. I didn't hit the guy because he was dancing with your sister. I hit him because he fucked her and then bragged about it to everyone in the damn company. She even gave him her underwear as a token of her appreciation. There was no answer on the other end of the wire. Did she say why her boyfriend was arrested last night? No, but she said you had something to do with it. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock on the apartment door. Sarah, I gotta go. I'll call you tomorrow. The cop at my door was an ugly guy, and he was also my brother-in-law. Come on in, Toby. It's always good to see family. You want a beer? Sure. I could use something cold. There was a Foster's hidden behind the Coke Robbie brought in. I had a nausea attack from the pain pills. John, we found the guy who helped you at the station. The two guys he hired to beat you up were more than happy to point him out. I believe it was Dirk Franklin? That's right. I assume you know him? He was messing around with Noreen. I tried to persuade him to stop, but he didn't seem in the mood for it. He confessed to everything, so this will save us the expense and trouble of a trial. The judge will sentence him and his two buddies on Friday. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing he'll get 2 to 3 years, probably right here in the county jail. That's good news. Toby couldn't help but chuckle. You're gonna get your revenge, aren't you, John? I'm hoping for some help from a few friends. You're not going to get me into any trouble, are you? It sounds like you volunteered to help, Toby. That's one way to put it. I gotta go. If you want to talk to this guy, he'll be in the city jail until sentencing. I'll come by tomorrow morning. How's Sally, by the way? Are you looking after my sister? I think it's the other way around. She's looking out for me. The hardest part of getting to the police station was getting in and out of the truck. I didn't know what was worse, being tied up like a mummy or not being able to bend over. When I entered the room, a wide grin was shining on Dirk's face. Looks like you're a little sore there, Mr. Esterly. Did you trip over a tree branch? He seemed to like the grimace on my face as I sat up. Welcome to Schuylkill County, Dirk. This is my territory, and I'll make sure you enjoy yourself while you're here. I don't think so, John. I'm bailing out of here on Friday. Was it worth it? Not because of what I saw, you bandaged up like a turkey. Looks like you lost your job and your wife. Was it worth it to you? I didn't understand the question. I never did anything to you that you didn't deserve. You should have just left it alone. I was better than you, and I still am. I think my wife thought so, too. Well, she's all yours now. I hope you like her. Oh, I will. By the way, I've enjoyed her 3 times since you left. Once was at home in your bed while the kids were at school. You really pissed her off when you served her with divorce papers. That son of a bitch did everything he could to piss me off. If the judge decides to let him serve time in state prison, it'll be harder for me to pay him back. The DA's office was on the 3rd floor, and the old courthouse didn't have an elevator. Not exactly wheelchair-friendly. Seems like one of the charitable organizations should take care of that by now. John Esterly, I hear you're back in town. Elizabeth Vargas graduated first in our class. She went to Pennsylvania State University on a full scholarship and earned her law degree. She married the captain of the soccer team, who was the only guy in our class to go to the U.S. Air Force Academy. They were the perfect couple, except for the fact that Captain Philip Vargas died in a car accident after they were married 10 years ago. The next 5 minutes were filled with chatter about the good old days. I felt awkward talking to her. She belonged to the elite, and I was one of the minor players. I smiled and tried to be polite. I was looking for a graceful way out. Well, it was nice talking to you, Elizabeth. I'm recently back in town and heard you were working here. I just wanted to say hello. With an embarrassed smile, I got up to leave. Sit down, John. The polite chit-chat is over. You're here about Dirk Franklin, aren't you? Yes, but when I saw you here, I decided it wasn't such a good idea. I felt like a beached whale trying to get back in the water. I've been assigned this case, John, so I know a little bit about what's going on. It's clear as day. He's going to prison. What did you want to talk about? I think that's it. I just wanted to make sure he got what he deserved. Elizabeth Vargas leaned back in her chair and smiled at me. It was pretty funny because usually you imagine big, tough guys doing it. You're starting to piss me off, John. I don't like it. I caught myself rubbing my fingers together and looking down at the floor. I wasn't comfortable discussing this problem with a woman, especially one like Elizabeth. She wasn't going to let it go unaddressed. Dirk Franklin had hurt me deeply. I lost my job, my wife, and my children because of him. I just wanted to make sure his stay in prison wasn't a vacation. Do you want him to stay in county or go to state? Do I have a choice? I can't keep him more than 2 years in county jail. If I give him more than that, I'll be forced to send him to one of the state facilities. She noticed I was smiling. I think 2 years here would be quite enough. With some effort, I stood up again. This time she didn't stop me, but when I turned around, she said, "John, would you mind meeting me for lunch at Scripsy's around noon?" I nodded, and when I gave her another slight smile, she smiled back. It could be an interesting lunch. After I left the courthouse, I did a little shopping. I bought a nice shirt and some new pants. I used to only bring work clothes with me. I also bought a case of beer. I decided that if I had to choose between pills and beer, beer would win. I wasn't sure if lunch would be business or pleasure. It was the latter. Elizabeth came home after Philip died. It turned out she was receiving some kind of government compensation but still needed a job. She had a 16-year-old son, Philip Jr., whom she called Second. After he was born, they decided they didn't want to call him Junior or Philip, so they settled on Second. It was hard to get much personal information from her without being overly curious, so I just let her tell me what she wanted me to know. I didn't say anything at all about my situation because I was afraid of being labeled a wimp. My self-esteem was somewhat low at the moment, so I was in dire need of protection. Before Elizabeth left to go back to work, she told me not to worry about the upcoming sentencing. The smile on my face quickly disappeared when I got home. My 3 kids were sitting on the porch with their suitcases and travel bags. "What the hell are you guys doing here?" No one wanted to answer me. "How did you know where I lived?" Brian decided to break the ice. "Uncle Robbie gave us the address." "I don't see a car. How did you get here?" "Aunt Sarah drove us here, but she couldn't stay." Brian stood up as I approached the porch. "Could you get the case of beer out of the car, please? I'm having a hard time lifting it." Terry helped me into the house. It wasn't really necessary, but I could understand why it looked like I needed help. Brian took the beer into the kitchen, and Sal made everyone cold ice cream. I didn't know how long they'd been there before I got back. "And just why did Aunt Sarah bring you all here?" "She said it was the best thing to do under the circumstances." Brian kept talking. He answered my questions, but I never learned anything. I took a big sip of soda and wished I had bought a cold beer instead of a warm one. "Under what circumstances?" Brian didn't want to answer. The 3 of them sat there looking at each other. Finally, Terry spoke up. "A couple days ago, Sal came home early from school and saw Mom having sex with some guy in your bedroom." "That's great! That's awesome!" "Did she know who the guy was?" Sal was sitting right there. I could have asked her directly, but somehow it didn't seem right. "She didn't know his name, but she said it was a guy you worked with." I looked at my youngest daughter. "What did you do, sweetie?" "I watched it for a couple minutes. I've seen people having sex on the internet before, but it's different when your mother is dating a man she doesn't know. It was disgusting. I left and went back to school." "Did your mother know you were there?" "I don't think so." She was lying with her eyes closed most of the time. In anger, I threw an empty soda can across the room. It bounced around like a child's toy. "Have you kids had lunch yet?" No." "Terry, how about ordering us a couple pizzas?" While the kids were sorting out their things, I called my lawyer and had him redo the divorce papers so I could get full custody. It was a risky move, but I decided to go for it. After that, I called Sarah. She no longer spoke to her sister or supported her in any way. When the kids came to her for help, she insisted that they stay with me and even volunteered to drive them. It was nice to have an ally of sorts. Sarah had already told Noreen where the kids were and why. Pizza turned out to be an early dinner. We talked about other things for a bit, and then we all left me alone and went to bed. In the depths of the refrigerator, I found another Cold Foster's. The fresh ones were great, but they were still better cold. I popped a pain pill along with the beer, hoping it would knock me out. It worked. Friday came and the sentences were announced. Dirk only got a year, but he'll have to serve it in the county jail. He'll probably be out in 6 months. Normally that would be good, but not in Dirk's case. 2 of his goons got 6 months each minus time served. Sometimes I don't understand the justice system, but overall I was happy with the outcome. Saturday was a busy day. The whole day was spent settling the kids in. Although they brought a lot of stuff, they each realized they had forgotten something during the course of packing. The afternoon trip to Walmart hit my wallet hard, but it was necessary. By the end of the day, things had normalized as much as possible. No one seemed to miss Noreen. When we got home, I realized I was running low on pain pills, so I started drinking more beer. I didn't plan on driving or operating any heavy equipment. The next morning, I was trying to get all thoughts out of my head when I heard Toby talking to the kids. I pulled on my jeans, but instead of a pain pill, I just swallowed 2 aspirin pills. Eventually, I had to wean myself off of it. My appearance in the kitchen was greeted with a round of applause. My family showed little sympathy for my woes. The general consensus was that I drank beer because I wanted to, not because I had to. They were right, of course. Terry poured me a cup of hot coffee as I plopped down at the table, and then all 3 kids dispersed as if they knew Toby and I needed to talk. "We've got a little problem, John. I was just starting to get used to things being settled, and Toby decided to indulge me with something new." I tried to take a sip of my black coffee, but it was too hot. I set the mug on the table with a sigh. "Okay, Toby. Surprise me. What's the new problem?" Saturday morning, the guards found Dirk Franklin in the prison laundry room. Someone had beaten him to a pulp. In addition to a smashed face, he had broken ribs and other internal injuries we couldn't diagnose. That doesn't happen very often here. Wow, it didn't take him long to piss off his new friends. "We don't think it was anyone new." Toby noticed me smiling as he took another sip of his morning drink. It was still hot, but it was getting better. Apparently, someone had let it slip that Dirk had given up his hired help to get his sentence commuted. Although his thugs got less time than he did, they weren't very happy about the news. We don't have any proof that they did it, and frankly, we don't have much interest in investigating the case. I stood up and filled Toby's cup again. He noticed I was still smiling. "That's the problem, John. The coffee was great, but the smile disappeared from my face. They had to move Dirk to a hospital in Allentown. There was a guard watching over him, but last night Dirk disappeared. No one knows when or how. The staff didn't think he could leave on his own, but it looks like they were wrong." I never finished my coffee. I just got up and poured it down the sink. Toby sat quietly, and I stood looking out the kitchen window. There was no view out there, just the brick wall of the neighboring store. It didn't matter what I was looking at. I had never felt threatened by Dirk, but the thought of him walking around on the loose irritated me. After a few moments, I heard my brother-in-law get up from his chair. "John, I'll keep you posted on what's going on. If I find out anything, I'll let you know." I was still staring at the brick wall when I heard the back door close. "Daddy, do you want me to make you some scrambled eggs?" "That would be great, Terry. Let me take a quick shower first." That same day, I called Sarah. She hadn't heard from Noreen and had no idea where she was. I didn't know if that was good news or bad news. Life was starting to get better. My injuries healed quickly. I got a job with a small company in Tamaqua where I had an easy commute to work. The kids had no trouble settling in. We started spending more time with Elizabeth and her son. The other and Brian seemed to find common ground, and I think I saw Terry look at him a few times. Although I spent most of my time with Elizabeth at public events and with our families, we also began to have a few celebratory dinners and go to the movies from time to time. Every 2 weeks, I asked Toby to deliver a couple packs of cigarettes to the guys who beat me up. There was never any conversation between us, but there was an understanding. Toby said they seemed to realize what the hell I was doing. If it worked out the way I hoped, it would be worth the money spent. Cigarettes weren't cheap. Sarah and I never heard from Noreen. Was she back with Dirk or somewhere else? Then one day, 2 of my adversaries were released from detention and promptly disappeared. 3 months later, I received notice that my divorce was finalized and that I had been awarded custody of Brian and Sal. Terry was no longer considered a minor. She was attending dental school in Reading. Elizabeth and I began to spend more time together. While all of this was going on, I still couldn't shake the thought that somewhere out there, nearby, Dirk Franklin was lurking. Did he still harbor some grudge, or had he already retired from the business? I could never be sure, and it bothered me constantly. I took a job with a small independent auto insurance company in Pottsville. 6 months later, Elizabeth and I were quietly married. The only stipulation of our marriage was that she had to keep her old last name of Vargas. She had several reasons for this, and I couldn't blame her for it. Elizabeth learned that Noreen worked and lived at the Salvation Army in downtown Philadelphia. Although we never saw her again, She started sending birthday cards to the kids. Then I started getting cards. They came at different times, on Flag Day, Veterans Day, Tree Planting Day. They always said the same thing, "Thinking of you, DF." Of course, I showed them to Elizabeth, but we never figured out what to do with them. They came from various places on the East Coast. At first, I threw them away, but as they became more and more numerous, I became more and more concerned. Dirk Franklin was like a cockroach that I had no idea how to get rid of. Elizabeth was doing her best to keep me under control. I appreciated her support, but I felt helpless. The card I received about 2 weeks before Christmas was more ominous than the others. "I have a special gift for you. See you soon, DF." Dirk had never shown any desire to hurt any of the kids, but I wasn't sure if he still felt that way. I caught myself constantly worrying about Elizabeth and the children. He was out of my life, but he was still causing me distress. All I could do was wait and be ready for him to show up. 2 days before Christmas, it was finally over. It was an ordinary greeting card, but inside was a clipping from the Baltimore Sun newspaper. The body of a man identified as Dirk Franklin was found today in a burned-out automobile near a brickyard in Glengarry. Police were unable to determine the true cause of death because of the condition of the body, etc., etc. The postcard was not signed. It simply said, "Thanks for the cigarettes."